Welcome to the Great New Me Reclaim Your Time series, a set of audio messages to help you eliminate time drains that slow down progress towards your goals and vision. Coaching found me as a result of a series of life changes that led me to question what my purpose was. Prior to becoming a coach, I've run my own business as a consultant, helping ambitious founders scale their operations. And even before that, I worked as a consultant for a couple of the largest consulting firms on the globe, helping multinational organizations manage growth and to implement change. I believe in coaching because I know now that we all have the right answers within us. It's just about the fact that the busy and very noisy world we operate in many times obscures our inner wisdom. So I use coaching to help people recognize and listen to their own inner wisdom again. And in this series, what I'd like to do is to look at how we can sometimes get in our own way and as a result, get less done than we had planned or would have liked. I talk to many clients who go for weeks or months and on occasions years wanting to achieve particular goals, but for various reasons, I'm not going to call them excuses, are unable to do so. And what I've found at the foundation of these conversations is that the real key to the various and many varied obstacles that create delay is rooted within particular thinking patterns, patterns that have been so ingrained as habits to the point that they're practically automatic and they just happen and they go unchallenged, and people just keep going day in day out in those thinking patterns. So the thinking pattern that I'd like to focus on in this episode is perfectionism. And this is a very common thinking pattern, I should know, because I've certainly had to deal with it. We all had it drummed into us as children and as young people that we must do our very best. Best is better than better, and certainly better than just good. Or if we're not number one, then we're a loser. And our parents, our teachers, carers, they reinforced these messages because they wanted to see effort from us. They wanted us to do well, and we're looking for ways to help us succeed. However, for many of us, this led to a belief that we must impress in order to be liked or loved. And the consequence of this belief is that we automatically look to put inordinate amounts of energy into everything we touch, irrespective of how important it is in the grand scheme of things, and irrespective of whether or not we're the right person to achieve the best outcome. The good news is that as a result, we usually produce a good result, and that's fantastic. However, the sting of the tail, the bad news, comes in various forms. Sometimes it takes so long to get a piece of work finished that we've delayed other tasks and or possibly missed out on other opportunities. Or it's taken so long to get it just right that the client or customer or boss or manager that we're trying to do this for has become disgruntled, and suddenly the relationships are under strain. Or just even thinking about the fact that it's not done yet, or there's other stuff that hasn't been done yet, creates stress in your life, and makes you an unhappy person. You might find if you run your own business that you never have enough time to work on taking the business forwards because most of your time is taken up perfecting delivery for existing customers. If you are climbing the career ladder, you might find that you start to stall because you're not able to demonstrate to the people around you that you're able to do more and take on more responsibility. Ironically, the disadvantages we've just touched on here mean that the bigger goal that you're aiming for, the end game that you'd like to reach as a result of the tasks or actions that you are perfecting along the way. This might be your thriving business or your successful career or your happy relationships or family. Those bigger goals don't happen as perfectly as you'd like, because you've gotten too caught up in perfecting some of the steps along the way, as opposed to thinking about that bigger picture. I believe there's a different way. However, it does require a different way of thinking. Before I expand on that different way of thinking, I'd like to explore how and why we allow ourselves to be distracted from the bigger picture, and instead, spend our time focusing on the immediate tasks in our eye line. And to think about that, I need us to think about the way humans have evolved. One of the key things that we've done to progress is move into communities and groups, and groups work together and we support each other. So no one person has to do everything on their own. And as part of that, I suspect a lot of that happened because humans are born unable to fend for themselves for quite a number of years. And therefore, they needed protection. They needed people around them to support them. So children tend to be protected by their families or a whole village. And as a result of that, we have evolved to seek belonging. And we learn very quickly to reassure ourselves of that belonging by creating circumstances to show us that we are recognized and we're heard. Babies do that by crying. A toddler might throw a tantrum and to get attention. And as each child grows up, they realize how they get praise for perhaps drawing a pretty picture or reading a word right or winning a race. And that is recognition. And that is something that they know they need, recognition, because that shows they belong and they'll be protected. However, that's also where the seeds of perfection start to form. And what you might find is that individuals that have grown up in circumstances where there's a lot going on, there's a lot of noise, and perhaps need to be special in order to get attention, those sorts of individuals tend to either be perfectionists or disruptions, or possibly both. So if you find perfectionist tendencies in yourself, and I suspect you do, otherwise you won't be listening to this, try looking back at the circumstances around you as you grew up. And I'm sure you're going to notice that there might have been a possibility of going unnoticed if you hadn't drawn attention by perhaps participating in activities that were somewhat out of the ordinary, or doing some things particularly well, or even being a particularly naughty young person. Because what you did at that point, what you were doing was that you found a way to sustain the attention that you needed in order to feel belonging, and you were training yourself to stand out. This behavior was driven by a deep-seated part of our brain that recognizes that we need to belong in order to survive. The flip side of that thinking is that if I get rejected, I might die. And indeed, this is the case, because if as a baby I had been rejected by everyone around me and left to fend for myself, I wouldn't be here today. But though we're no longer babies or children, many of us still have this very strong fear of rejection that makes us want to please by doing things perfectly. And that's the root of our need to do things perfectly. We want to sustain that sense of belonging. So that's why we do it. But if we think about it, we're no longer babies or young children. We can fend for ourselves. We don't necessarily need to have that recognition in order to survive. We might like it, and of course it's lovely to feel needed and feel belonging, but it's not a need. It's not a matter of do or die. So maybe we don't need to jeopardize our goals by sticking to that way of thinking. So how can we start to break that habit? How can we break a habit that we've spent decades perfecting, to avoid it torpedoing our long-term goals? And the thinking approach that I'd like you to consider is the concept of sharing. The thing about being a perfectionist is that as a perfectionist, there's a big tendency to rely on oneself. There's an over-reliance on oneself to do all of the heavy lifting. And actually, behind that over-reliance on oneself is a subconscious thinking that the recognition that comes from doing this work will come to me. So if I do all the heavy lifting and I get it right, the recognition that that comes from doing that work will come to me. But now that I say it that way, it sounds possibly quite selfish. And I'm sure it's never your intent to be selfish. Certainly wasn't mine. When, you know, as I practice perfectionism, and I'm sure it's not your intent to be selfish. What we're looking for is to do the best. However, now that we've also recognized that the short-term best is jeopardizing prospects for longer-term success, maybe it's worth looking at a different way of doing things and considering this sharing concept in a little bit more detail. So how does sharing begin to make a difference? Well, what I tend to suggest is when you find yourself buried in a piece of work that's holding you up, because there's other things that you know you need to do, but you're too busy doing this one thing and trying to make it perfect, or indeed holding other people up. You know, people are waiting on you to actually, you know, see that result that you promised them. Instead of worrying about the consequences of delay and letting that stress you out, a different way of thinking is to think, okay, so how can I share this? How can I share this work and share the recognition that will come from achieving a good job? And visualize who you can share the work with, how the accolades will also be shared. Visualize the joy and the pride you'll feel from seeing someone else also being recognized for achieving this outcome. If you spend a few moments thinking about this, I promise you, you will find a helper or partner for your task within minutes or hours, maybe days, depending on how big the task is, but you'll find someone that can help you. And now you have someone by your side to speed up the process of getting your task done. But we both know, or we all know, that that's not the whole answer, because there's a further blocker. As a perfectionist, you and I have a preference to do things your own way. And it makes sense because you want to make sure that it's done right. You want the right result. And this is probably because you are not certain that anyone else that gets involved will do the job as well as you could. And that's fair enough. However, if we bring our judgment into this equation and remember the holistic goal, that end result that we're aiming for, there's a way to actually feel comfortable about getting somebody else involved. What you want to think about is maybe how much of this activity or task you want to share. The fact that you're sharing doesn't mean you have to share everything. You don't have to give everything away. You can share a large part or a smaller part, but that depends on what this activity is. And I liken it to, like selling car insurance. If you were going to sell me car insurance and you consider me to be a high risk, because I've, crashed lots of cars in the past, you demand a high premium. So similarly, if you are dealing with a task that you believe is super important to your ultimate goal, so this task is the linchpin for achieving your 5-year plan, or will take your business to where you want it to be, then it's a high risk task, and you will perhaps not share as much of it as you would have shared other tasks. So you'll devote more time to staying involved and monitoring progress and outcomes. And you perhaps think of mitigations that you can use if the person that you're sharing with is not as able as you had initially thought. However, for other tasks, you might look at them and think, okay, yes, it needs to happen, but it's not such a key or critical part of my journey towards my end goal. And therefore, I'm quite happy to let somebody else take the lead on that, and I'll stay involved. And therefore it's happening without you needing as much attention as you would have paid it previously. But the whole point here is you are looking at each task as it contributes towards your end goal. And of course, you will get the benefit or the joy of sharing the work and sharing the accolades and helping others develop. But most importantly, because you are able to let something go and share something, you are getting closer to your ultimate goal that much quicker. So as I say, sharing is caring. So your next step is to think about your long to-do list and start to compare the items on that list against your ultimate objectives, and start to share generously. Now, a word of warning. I suspect there have been a few times you've nodded as you listen to this talk, but we all know that comprehending is not the same as doing. We live our lives in autopilot, and it takes sustained, persistent effort to change the programming that's running in the background. If you're wanting to affect change, change as in doing something different so that perfection doesn't get in your way, you need to understand your automatic programming. Otherwise, we'll finish this talk and you'll say, that was interesting, that was useful, I understood that, it makes sense. And you'll straight away go back to your automatic programming and keep doing what you always did. If you want to make a change, you need to notice your automatic programming, and you need to notice it as it's happening. And that requires a good level of mindfulness. The benefits of mindfulness and being able to increase that, I feel are just too numerous for me to start even trying to go through here. But suffice to say, if you are able to improve your mindfulness, you will improve your chances of ensuring that perfectionism doesn't stand in the way of your ultimate goals and objectives. So if we go back to seeing the change that led you to listen to this talk actually happens, ask yourself right now, what change are you going to commit to today? What are you going to do differently so that the rest of your life takes on a new trajectory? You can certainly start by picking up that to-do list that we talked about a few minutes ago and committing to reviewing that right now. Or if you can't commit to reviewing that right now, commit to yourself when you're going to review it. So at least you've got a goal as to when you're going to start making a difference. You can also get started on your journey to becoming a more mindful you today. You don't need to go on a retreat to get started. You don't need any yoga mats or, bungs and bells or whatever. All you need is a few minutes every day to stop and take stock. I can share with you a short guide to starting a journey into mindfulness. Just request this by emailing me at ola@greatnewme.com. Also, if you'd find it helpful to talk about what isn't working for you, what you're struggling with, I'd be delighted to talk. Again, email me at ola@greatnewme.com and we can set up a time for a free session. My email again is ola@greatnewme.com. That's spelled out O for Oscar, L for Lima, A for Alpha, at G for Golf, R for Romeo, the number 8, N for November, E for Echo, W for Whiskey, M for Mike, E for Echo.com. Thank you so much for listening. Well done for investing in yourself. And do remember, though, to see a change, you need to make a change. I wish you everything that you wish yourself. Until next time, take care.